So for the last 2 weeks, I've been here in Kenya at 2,400 meters above sea level on a running camp with running trips called the Kenya Experience. In today's video, I thought I would do a bit of a question and answer session with all of the comments on the previous videos. I've made 14 videos in total as part of this series. I think this is number 13, so there's still one to come, but I thought I would answer as many of the questions in today's video as I can. The majority of these questions are about training in Kenya, and some more specifically about the camp that I've been on. The camp here is called the Kenya Experience, and just as a bit of a disclaimer, I was invited on this trip as a content creator. I was gifted the opportunity to come here to attend. I've been incredibly grateful from the running trips for this opportunity, but they have not seen this video or they're not paying me to say anything, so I'll try and give you my opinion about the trip and what I've learned over the last few weeks. The 2-week camp itself cost £1,350, and that includes accommodation, paces for every run, professional Kenyan coaches, and 3 meals per day, as well as snacks in between. So everything is included. It's like a full board package. Everything here at the high altitude training center is included. So you get access to Lorna's track, which is the track I did drills on in yesterday's video. You get all your meals cooked for you in the kitchen. They cater for every dietary requirement, and you also get access to the gym and all of the core classes here. And this camp is also suitable for all runners. There's paces that can run at any pace, and you can do as much or as little of the program as you want. You can also add additional runs in there. It's very, very flexible in terms of the structure of the week. If you have any additional questions that I don't cover in this video, then please leave them in the comment section, and either myself or someone from Running Trips will get back to you as soon as possible. And I also just want to say I've only been in Kenya for 2 weeks, so I'm by no means an expert on all things Kenyan running. I'm just purely going to give you my opinions and my experience over the last 2 weeks. Without further ado, let's jump into some of the questions. The first one is from Tita Tota. He says, do you think 2 weeks is long enough to get a training benefit, and how long would you say is optimal for a visit to a 10? So yeah, I've been here for 2 weeks, and I would say after about 9 to 10 days, I would say I was fully acclimatized. So in that first 10-day period, we just did easy running just to acclimatize. Our heart rate was really high. Breathing was quite difficult on all runs, even easy runs. So it definitely takes a little bit of time to acclimatize to being at 2,400 meters above sea level. I had a few headaches in the first week as well, but that's very normal. And yeah, 2 weeks I would say is a good amount of time, but if I came again to Iten, I probably would be looking at 3 or 4 weeks, because I've just come to the end of the 2-week block, and I feel like I'm just getting into some really good runs and good training, and I reckon if I had another week, that would be optimal. So I personally would say 2 weeks is enough, but for a full sort of training benefit, you need to be here for at least 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks, if I'm totally honest. Next question is from Chris. He says, is it correct that all Kenyan sessions, be it track workouts, fartlek, hills or long runs, will be done in a fasted state first thing in the morning? Anything in the afternoon, evening will be just recovery jogging. So yeah, from what I've experienced, I can't speak on behalf of all Kenyan athletes, but it appears that a lot of runs here are fasted. Even long runs, tempo work and intervals seem to be done fasted. I think more at the elite end of Kenyan running, there's more emphasis on fueling throughout the runs. So for example, I've seen a lot of Morton gels, Morton carb drinks that the top level athletes will take, but the majority of athletes here in Kenya seem to be doing their runs fasted, which does take a little bit of getting used to. To be honest with you, I thought I was going to struggle more than I did, but I think as long as you get a good meal in the night before, I think we've been eating our evening meal at around 7:30, so fairly late. You wake up in the morning and you've still got enough energy stores to get the work done, and then we go straight to breakfast after the runs. So that's what I've experienced in terms of fasted running. I think they do quite a lot here, but I could be completely wrong. But that is just my experience. The next question is from Zishan. He says, I would love to try the Kenya experience. It looks epic, but I'm concerned I'd be the slowest and least experienced there. Would there be groups, paces, etc. for my level? So yeah, there is a wide range of people on the Kenya experience, from people that are running 30 minutes for 10k, all the way down to people that run maybe once or twice a week back home. In answer to your question, there are paces for all abilities. Some people at altitude have been really struggling to run continuously because of the high altitude, so there are even paces that will run with you and then walk with you if you need it. This camp is a Kenya experience. It's not for elite athletes, it's for a wide range of abilities. So if you're somebody who's only just getting into running, is a very much beginner, and you still want to experience the Kenyan way of running, the culture here, then I would say that this experience and this camp is probably pretty good pick for you. The next question is from Gary. He says, before you leave, do you think it's possible to jump in with one of the professional training groups to see how long you can hang with them? So in answer to the question, in Kenya, there are two main groups here in Iten, one of which is Lily's group, the biggest running group here. And I asked, would it be possible to go along to one of their sessions? I didn't actually have time to do it while I was here, but I was informed by one of the pacers that you're more than welcome to go along to their training runs. As long as you do what the coach prescribes, then there's no issues at all. So the answer would be yes, I could go along to one of the professional runs here in Iten, and if that's something you wanted to do when you're here, then you could. We kind of did that a little bit with the fartlek session. We went along to the local fartlek that started on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, and to be honest with you, I couldn't hold the top level pace for more than about 5-10 minutes. So in answer to your question, yes, you could join with the elite training groups here, but in terms of being able to hold their pace, I probably wouldn't be able to do that for much more than 10 minutes, I wouldn't have thought. Sophia asks, I wonder if you're able to have some food before the early morning run if you want. Running fasted, if you're not used to it, can be rough. Yeah, to be honest with you, fasted running isn't easy, and I've learned that over the last few days. Some of the runs I've felt a little bit underfueled, but in terms of you can eat before the run, it just means you have to get a little bit earlier. The majority of runs on the camp here start at 6:30, so they've just naturally been fasted, and we go to breakfast afterwards. But I also brought some snacks along with me from the UK, and I'd advise doing that as well. So I've had some malt loaf, some saurine, some cereal bars, that type of thing, just on the longer sort of sessions that I can take. So I'd advise, if you want to wake up a little bit earlier and have some breakfast, you can do that in your own room. There's no problem at all. But the breakfast here in Iten and at the high altitude training camp starts at 7:30. So if you run before that, it's going to be fasted. And if you run at like 7:30, there's a risk that you might miss breakfast. But then you can always go along to snacks at 10:30. So there's always going to be some sort of food around. And most of the time, if you go to the kitchen and say, "Oh, I missed breakfast. Do you have anything left over?" You'll be lucky, and they'll have something for you. So in terms of fasted running, if it's not something that you're comfortable doing, then bring your own snacks would be my advice. The next question is from Diki. He says, once you're back, will you change your training techniques, and what have you learned? So yeah, when I go back, two of the things I'm definitely going to take away are progression runs, because I never do any progression runs. I either do an easy run or a session, and I think like a progression run is a nice balance between the two. You start nice and easy, and then you progress into it, and you finish fast, and it builds confidence going into races. I think it also teaches discipline, so I'll definitely be doing a lot more of those. And the long runs I do back home are going to be a lot more focused on race pace in terms of marathon, because in Kenya, all of the long runs here on Saturday or Sunday, most of them on Saturday, are done at close to marathon effort. So I'm definitely going to be taking that home with me. In terms of the fartlek, they were really fun as well. The big takeaway from that was how strong it makes you feel when you run in as part of a group. So I'm going to try and train as much as I can with local athletes back home, because it really helps push you on. Just knowing that somebody else is there going through the same workout and the same pain as you really helps. So yeah, they're probably my main takeaways. And also the Sunday rest day we have here in Kenya has been really nice to sort of reset both physically and mentally, ready for the Monday. So I might consider taking the Sunday off as a bit of a rest day back home as well. The next question is from Virag. He says, does your watch track acclimatization? If yes, does it match how you feel? So I have a Coros Pace 2, and it doesn't track acclimatization. It does give me a running performance score, which when I arrived here, my running performance score was around 82% out of 100. And when I run at sea level, it's usually around even 19% between 96 and 102%. Say if I'm feeling really good, it would be 102. If I'm not feeling so great, it would be around the 90%. So I don't have an acclimatization tracking feature here, but my watch did tell me in terms of my running performance that on the first few runs, I wasn't quite living up to how I run at sea level in terms of heart rate, breathing, pace, that sort of thing, which is to be expected. But then over the last 5 days of the camp, my running performance has been back to around 100%. So I feel like I've definitely acclimatized as the camp's gone on. And I know if you have like a Garmin watch, you can track acclimatization if that's something that you want to look into as well. The next question is from Daniel. He says, how much would the trip cost if it was not gifted? So as I said in the introduction, it cost £1,350 for the 2-week training camp, which includes everything from accommodation, food, training plan, coaches, access to gym, access to the track, transfers from the airports. It doesn't include the flights, so you have to pay for your own flights in advance. But that's to be expected because everybody is travelling from all different parts of the world. We had people from Delhi, from Philadelphia in the US, Italy, the Netherlands. So it's a really diverse range of people here. But in terms of if the trip wasn't gifted, it would be £1,350 for the camp plus your flights. The next question is from Michelle. She says, would love to know how the slowest runners there feel and what they think. So yeah, in terms of the slower runners here, I can't speak on behalf of everyone here on the trip, but there's people that are complete novices to running. So one lady has only been running for the last few months and she runs once or twice a week. There's a gentleman here who's in his 60s. He's very fit for his age, but again, this camp is designed for all abilities. There's going to be pacers on every run that can run at your pace. So in terms of being a slower runner, if you want to call yourself that, or a beginner runner, I wouldn't worry too much about coming on this trip. If you have to walk, you walk. If you have to miss a session because you're not used to maybe running every day or every other day, then that's absolutely fine. You still get a really good experience. The next question is from Charminda. He or she, I'm not sure, says, what type of gels do you use while in Kenya on your long runs? And also, what type of gels do Kenyan use on their long runs? So in terms of my fueling, I've been using Precision Fuel and Hydration. That's just what I use for my marathon training. So on my long run, I took a carb gel, 30 gram carb gel. To be honest with you, I didn't bring too much on this trip. And in terms of what the Kenyans use, unless you're at the top level, elite level here in Kenya, then to be honest with you, they don't use gels at all. I wouldn't be surprised if half of the semi-professional and more amateur runners here in Kenya don't even know what gels are or use gels at all. They certainly wouldn't be using carb drinks. And that's just from what I've experienced. I don't think fueling is much of a focus over here in Kenya at the moment, mainly just getting the fuel in before and after the runs. So in terms of gels, I've not actually seen a single Kenyan use any gels since I've been here. The next question is from Time on Feet. He says, have you found that your body feels different running on more dirt paths? Is your recovery better because your bones are less pounded by the terrain, or do your ankles get challenged more with the uneven conditions underfoot? So in terms of how my body's felt, in terms of the terrain, yes, here in Kenya, most of the surface is dirt roads, which are a little bit uneven. So I did notice after the first maybe 3 or 4 runs that my ankles were a little bit sore, just from sort of maybe more using stability muscles. In terms of the impact, yeah, I think it does reduce some of the impact. Obviously we haven't been running as much on the roads, but because the elevation here in a 10 is so high, so for example on my easy runs I've been running like 200 meters of elevation. In terms of how my body's felt, it's felt a little bit beaten up, but mainly I think because of the different terrain. We're not used to it obviously, and also the elevation. So I wouldn't say necessarily I've benefited from running on softer surfaces here in Kenya as much as you may think. The next question is from Jeffrey. He says, relating to the fartlek, I'm interested in Kenya. How hard is the minute off? Is it a fast jog, a float, or a walk? So from my experience, in the fartlek that we did, it was 3 minutes on with 1 minute recovery, and the 1 minute's recovery did seem to be more of a float. It certainly wasn't a jog, a full recovery. And for me, being at altitude, my heart rate was hardly coming down at all in those 1 minute intervals, which is why I think it was so tough. But yeah, for the Kenyan runners, I think those 1 minute offs are more of floats. They sort of regroup a little bit in those recovery periods, and then they go again as a group in that 3 minute period. So yeah, in terms of the floats, they would seem to be pretty high intensity. The whole session, to be honest with you, was around 95% effort. So it almost felt like a race effort. And after that session, it did start at 9 o'clock. I felt a little bit headachy and dehydrated afterwards, mainly from the heat. So yeah, those fartlek sessions are pretty intense. If you go along to one of them, then yeah, definitely go a little bit more on the cautious side than I did, because yeah, I struggled a little bit that afternoon in terms of recovery. Next question is from Jason. He says, what types of shoes are the locals wearing during these training sessions? So I think it depends on the athlete, but majority of Kenyan runners that I've seen have just been running in daily trainers. A lot of them look pretty beaten up, to be honest with you. I think the roads here in Iten, with them being dirt, are quite harsh on the shoes, and they seem to break down quite quickly. The more top level runners have been using the carbon fibre plated shoes. I've seen a lot of Adidas Pro 2s. A few Vaporflies, but the majority of Kenyan runners just run in what they have available, and that is the main constraint to that, I believe, is their wealth and how much money they have to spend on shoes. So for example, on the fartlek session, there was runners running their fartlek in really old Pegasus turbos from Nike. So in terms of the footwear, I think there's a less emphasis on having like the latest shoe here in a tent, and certainly I've experienced that. There's been a lot of older models kicking around, and a lot of the running shops here sell secondhand shoes to the local athletes. So I think in terms of shoes that locals wear, they don't really care as long as they can get out and run. They're not really bothered. In terms of my shoes that I've used since I've been here, the one shoe that I would recommend bringing is sort of a road to trail shoe. So I use the A6 Nova Blast TR, which is like a shoe with a little bit extra grip on the bottom, which is great on the road and also great on the uneven, more trail terrain here in Iten. And that's what I would advise bringing. But in terms of the long runs, then you can run in your Alpha Flies, your Vapor Flies, your carbon racing shoes, no problem. But yeah, for the majority of runs here in Kenya, I would probably recommend a road to trail or even a trail shoe for the majority of the terrain. The next question is from Sid, and this was on one of the earlier videos. He says, how come you're training already if you said it takes 1 week for your body to get used to the altitude? So in terms of the first week, yeah, it did take our bodies a little time to adjust to being at the altitude in terms of breathing, heart rate, but you're still able to train easy. You just have to keep it under control, otherwise you risk just being overly fatigued. So I would just say, just take it easy in the first week. You can train. We didn't really do too much intensity. I think our first track session was like 100-meter strides, just to get used to running at altitude, used to the breathing and the difference that there is here at altitude compared to sea level. So in terms of the first week, we took it nice and easy, and then in the second week we were able to do some proper sessions. The next question is from Derek. He says, if you went on one of these running tours, is 2 weeks the minimum it's worth going on due to your body needing to get used to the altitude first? So I would say, for me personally, I would say 2 weeks is definitely the minimum in terms of getting any benefit from the training. If you're just looking to come out to Kenya to experience it, then there's people on this camp that have come just for the week. But if you're really looking to benefit from being at altitude, then you need to be here for 3 weeks or more. I think most of the top level athletes come here for a couple of months at least. So in terms of the longer you stay here, the more benefit you're going to get from being at altitude, basically. Next question is from Nording, the penultimate question. He says, do the Kenyans avoid roads or just run on soft surfaces? So the majority of Kenyan running that I've experienced, unless it's like a really fast long run or an interval session where you're trying to hit paces that are done on the track, everything else is done on dirt roads. So all of the easy runs, the progression runs, even some of the tempo runs, the fartlek was done on the dirt. So it does appear that Kenyans prefer to use the sort of dirt track. It's mainly just because that's what they have available over here. Only the sort of main roads are paved, and they're quite busy in terms of traffic. So you don't want to be running down those early in the morning just because it's not as safe as running out on the trails. And there's some really beautiful sort of like forest areas here in the Iten that are just really nice to get out and train on for your easy runs. So I think that's probably why Kenyans use dirt tracks more than the roads, just because of what they have available to them. The final question is from Juha. He says, how are you feeling on the surface? Is it easier than running at home on the legs, as it's not asphalt. So as I said in the previous question, I've not found it any easier, but I think that's mainly because of the elevation here in a 10. You can't avoid the hills. Whenever you leave the camp here at the high altitude training centre, you either go downhill to the right into a 10, the centre, or you turn left and you've got rolling hills all the way to Eldoret. So in terms of how my body's felt on running on softer surfaces, I wouldn't say I've noticed it too much, mainly because the elevation has been quite challenging. So that brings me to the end of this video in terms of a question and answer session of training here in Kenya. Hopefully that's answered some of your questions, and as I said, if you have any extra questions, then please leave them down in the comments. I also just wanted to mention again the Gathimba Foundation, I think that's how you pronounce it, but they were the charity that we visited, and they support low-income families here in a 10 with housing, getting children to school. They sponsor 577 children. So if you would like to donate to that charity, I've left a link to the foundation, and the work they were doing was incredible. All the money you donate goes straight into the projects, whereas if you donate to bigger organisations, sometimes a little bit of that money is lost in donation. In terms of the camp, again, it's been called the Kenya Experience. If you want to look it up, I'll leave a link down below. And it's been with Running Trips, which are a UK-based company. And I definitely would recommend checking that out if you are looking to come to a 10. So yeah, thanks for watching. That pretty much wraps up the end of my trip here in Kenya. It's been an incredible experience. There's going to be one more video coming out of my last run here in a 10. But until next time, aspire to run, run to inspire, and we'll see you again soon.